Common Purpose is a live stream podcast featuring Tim Kelly, a Chattanooga-based businessman and mayoral candidate who loves this city and has made his life here. Beyond the conversation, Common Purpose is a show about elevating the bonds that unite us as a community and resisting the forces that would tear us apart.
Okay, well, welcome to Common Purpose, the podcast about elevating the bonds that unite us here in Chattanooga. I'm Tim Kelly. Today we're joined by Luke Swab. It's my pleasure. Luke interviewed me for his podcast, which is People of Chattanooga, which is very, very popular, a heck of a lot more popular than this podcast. In the series that we've done here about what Chattanooga is all about, I could not think of a better person to have on just to talk about his unique perspective on Chattanooga. For those of you that might not know, People of Chattanooga is a weekly podcast that interviews unique individuals that make up our wonderful city, from adventurers and risk takers to entrepreneurs, creative thinkers. I mean, this thing could be like a 3-hour podcast, so brace yourselves. We're going to try to control ourselves, but this is almost certainly just going to kind of go all over the place. But you've done a fantastic job of just curating the people that you've chosen to interview. It's endlessly fascinating. I'm curious, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I mean, like, how do you arrive at how do you decide who to have on your podcast?
That's a great question, Tim, and thank you for the overly kind intro. Mm-hmm. That was really nice.
It's not overly kind.
Well, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. The reason I created the People of Chattanooga podcast is because I'm not from Chattanooga. Yeah. I've been here for 5 years. I love Chattanooga. I love the topography. I love adventure, and I came here. I tell everyone I didn't come here for a job. Right. That's how people usually move into cities. Yep. I came here because I was tuned into the city, and I love the outdoors. And I knew this was my town, right. But I needed to make friends. Yeah. And most people make their friends in their job. Yep. Yep. And I was trying to get connected, and that was taking a little longer than I wanted. So I figured I would just start a podcast called People of Chattanooga. And, I'm Luke Swab. Would you like to have a 2-hour conversation with me with our phones turned off? And who are you? Why? But I'm Luke Swab and I have a podcast.
Oh my God, man. That's brilliant.
I would. And they're like, sure, I'll be on your podcast. Yeah. And then I get to, find some of the coolest people who I think are doing big things in Chattanooga and get to meet them. And then it just snowballs. Wow. And they're like, oh, you should have this person on. You should have that person on.
That is brilliant.
So that was kind of my hack or whatever.
Well, I mean, that is a brilliant life hack for a person in a new city, I got to say. And you have done a significant public service in the meantime, because I say all the time, Chattanooga is full of really talented people that could be anywhere, but they choose to be here for presumably the same reasons that you choose. Or, I mean, I guess there's any number of reasons. But that's an abstract notion, right? You literally define, the people on your podcast are the definition of that fascinating edge of people that could be anywhere but choose to be here.
Absolutely.
And we'll get to more of that later. But first, I mean, again, as you said, you've chosen Chattanooga. How the hell did you get here and why?
Oh, it's a long story. But I first got tuned into Chattanooga in high school. Yep. And during spring break, I came down here and rafted the Ocoee and things like that with one of my best friends. Yeah. Then he came down here to go to school at Southern Adventist University, and I would periodically visit him once a year. And I really liked this city. And fast forward 10 years, he's moved out of Chattanooga. I was living in Lansing, and we both hated the cities we lived in. Yeah. And we're like, if you could dream the best city in America, and this is a true story, we're like, you got Boulder, you got Seattle's getting kind of trendy, you got Asheville, you got Austin, Texas. And we're like, Chattanooga was pretty cool. Right. So, we started the life dream, and we bought, substantial amount of acres out in Soddy Daisy, and we just moved down here. That's awesome. So that's what happened.
That's a great story. And so you are also a commercial fisherman, is that correct?
I am a commercial fisherman. So
dude, tell us about that. Okay. And maybe tack on your favorite sea story. You should have
sure.
One. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a commercial fisherman. I have been since I was 18 years old.
So cool.
So half of my life now. I'm 37. And oh man. I grew up in northern Michigan. We didn't have much opportunity,
Sure.
and you hear these stories of rich Alaskan fishermen.
Right.
And I wanted to be a rich Alaskan fisherman.
Right.
I mean, I didn't want to be
Yeah.
a poor northern Michigan guy.
Right.
It's not that easy. It turns out it's very difficult to be a rich Alaskan fisherman. But I did go up there, and I worked for 2 summers for my cousin who had a fishing boat.
Okay.
And then that third year kind of opened my eyes to, I made $10,000 one summer as a deckhand, but my uncle made 50.
Wow.
I'm like, well, maybe I should, be the boss.
Yeah.
So luckily, when you're 20, you're young and you're dumb and you think everything's really easy, and that's actually helpful. So you can take larger risks when you're young.
Yeah.
So I took that risk, and I bought a fishing boat. My dad lent me money for the permit, which allows you to fish, and then my dad and I. We went up there and we fished and we killed it. We got 120,000 pounds of salmon. And
Wow. So mainly salmon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I catch the sockeye salmon out of Bristol Bay.
Wow.
And there's another guy in town that used to commercial fish for salmon, Thomas Persinger.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I know Thomas. Yeah.
Yeah. Small town. Chattanooga's a small town.
Totally, yeah.
So there's
That's
2 of us
amazing.
here.
That is super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, there used to be some commercial fishing going on in the Tennessee River. I think a lot of it was not legal for
What was it for?
paddlefish.
Paddlefish.
Yeah, people catch paddlefish for the roe, which apparently is indistinguishable from Russian caviar roe.
So
and
rumor
sturgeon roe. Yeah.
Okay. Rumor has it all the roe that we catch pays all the overhead for the canneries.
It could be.
So-
I mean, it's again, it was an underground thing. It may still be going on. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
They're out there at night. I mean, obviously, with the Tennessee Aquariums kind of led the charge on. I say it ought to be like a sustainability museum. It's not just a fish tank. They do a lot of really cool work around restoring fisheries, and the sturgeon in the Tennessee River are a great comeback story. But hopefully, there's they've put an end to that illegal. That illegal fishing, because that's, I think, what knocked that population back for a lot of years.
And I have to, I like full disclosure.
Yeah.
I am a fisherman by trade, but I know nothing about actually fishing. I know how to catch fish with a net, but you give me a pole or take me up to like fly fishing or
That's
something.
interesting.
I don't even have a fishing rod.
Yeah.
To be honest.
That's crazy.
It's a job. It's how I make some money.
Yeah.
And it's not a hobby.
That's funny, because it reminds me of a lot of people try to pigeonhole business. I mean, I'm
Sure.
a small business person, right? And I say all the time, like, they're, in this kind of this political pursuit I'm doing, they're like, well, you don't need another business person like Donald Trump. I'm like, it's like sports. A
Yeah.
guy that throws darts and a guy that drives a Formula One car, they're both make their living from sports, but they've got almost nothing in common with each other. So it's a similar sort of thing, right? People lump you together for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Like you say, that's a commercial enterprise. I'm sure.
Well, I mean,
Fascinating.
it's just how people interact. I mean,
Yeah.
fishing, they associate them together.
Yeah, well, I would have. I'm glad you said that. It's fascinating stuff. Well, let's get back to your podcast.
Okay.
I mean, that's a great thing. I mean, we'll talk a little more about that, and then talk more specifically about Chattanooga. But is there one interview in particular that stands out to you, the most
Oh, my
unusual?
goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, Scotty Bowman made me cry at the end.
Really?
I was
Scotty's on the river.
Yeah, Sky's on the River. She started the Big Chill and Grill,
Yeah.
and Sky's on the River, and she has a fantastic life story about being addicted to drugs and alcohol,
Okay.
and her recovery on getting clean,
Yeah.
and also Jack Lupton was a huge part of her
Really?
story.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
and yeah, I mean, Jack Lupton loaned her money for the Big Chill,
Okay.
and actually bought her own health insurance so she could afford to go to rehab. I'm getting chills right now telling me Scotty's an amazing person.
Yeah.
And at the end there, I just had to cut it short because I was tearing up.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know her, but I've heard amazing things, and I will now go back and listen to that
listen
podcast.
to that. And she only had really good things to say about Jack. And unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years before I even knew about him, let alone I would love to talk to him.
Well, he made an incredible impact on Chattanooga,
Yeah.
and wealthy people get a lot of grief,
Sure.
as though there's something, automatically endemically bad about that. But he's a classic example of somebody who made a huge difference in the life of Chattanooga with his wealth and privilege. He did the Tennessee Aquarium. I mean, that was him, 100%. But from what I'm told, I had no idea about that story. But he made a difference in a lot of individual people's lives. And from our podcast, I'm a big believer in the concept of karma, and I really do think that's how it happens, is one person at a time.
And then that's another fun thing about this podcast, because he also helped Monte Buell.
Yeah, right.
And
who's a friend of mine as well. I mean, obviously a competitor, but
Sure.
Monty and I get along famously, and he that's right.
And as I do this podcast, I just find out more of the history of Chattanooga. And when I was younger, I thought history was boring.
Right.
But history is so interesting.
Yeah.
I just had a bad history teacher.
Yeah.
Sorry, history teacher.
No.
I mean, if you make history boring, like it might not be your job. That you
It's not facts and figures, right? It's you've got to bring it to
Stories.
life. It is stories, right? And that's exactly what it is, So that's good stuff. Well, so what's the most interesting thing you've learned about Chattanooga from doing the podcast?
Oh man, great question. From doing the podcast, what I learned, I don't know. Everyone loves Chattanooga.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone that I've had, which is not a surprise, but every guest I've had only has good things to say about the city for the most part. I mean, there's, no place is ever perfect. There's no
Right.
Narnia.
Right.
But like overall, it's a great city to live in.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Any preconceived notions that you had before you came here that you have since changed your mind about since
Well, the
moving?
city has changed.
Yeah.
I was living in Lansing, Michigan, and I was starting to do some real estate, some buy and hold investing.
Yeah.
And the prices in Chattanooga at the time were matching Lansing, and this is 5 or so years ago, and it has been. The prices in Chattanooga have gone up
Yeah, they definitely have.
substantially in the last 5 years, and I find it more and more difficult to do real estate investing here. It's still possible, but it's not. You got to be on your A game. There's a lot of smart people doing real estate in Chattanooga.
Yeah, there are, and it's a Goldilocks problem, right? I mean,
is.
there's still a lot of neighborhoods in Chattanooga that are economically depressed and need investment, but if investment is located narrowly in certain neighborhoods, then that's where you run into gentrification and issues where it's not even possible to make wise investment. And personally, having been talking to people for the last year about various civic issues in Chattanooga, I think it goes back to schools. Because if good schools are evenly distributed through the city, you don't have these pockets of intense speculation and then other places where there's just neglect. That's the weird thing about Chattanooga.
I heard you talk about that. Was that on Nathan's podcast?
Probably, yeah.
Comes down to schools.
I
Yeah,
think it
because
does, yeah.
I mean that's what drives North Shore prices is
Totally.
is the school over there.
Oh, I tell the story. Well, I'm here to interview you, but I'm going to tell you the story now. But Sally Robinson was a city council woman back in the day. Gosh, what did that have been? So she might be watching. Her daughter, Susanna Murdoch, is a vice mayor up on Signal now. But she had this. She was a realtor, and and back in those days, Hill City, North Chattanooga was a poor neighborhood. I mean, it was not a good neighborhood at all. Got across Hickson Pike into Riverview. That was fancier, but it still wasn't ultra fancy. But Hill City, like Graham and Bell and not Bell, well,
Snow.
Bell Ave, the whole area was really up Forest Avenue. All that stuff was a very, very poor, very rough. Old neighborhood, and I think, I'm not speaking for Sally, but her vision was really, I mean, obviously an education is good on its own merits, full stop, for the kids that are there, but I think probably had to do to some extent with neighborhood revitalization and real estate, and by God, it worked. I mean, to a fare thee well, right? I mean, almost too well, because you look at North Chattanooga now. Good luck.
Good luck is correct.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's a good problem to have. It's just a pick your hard sort of thing. You've seen that meme going around. Pick your problem.
Yeah.
But it is if nothing else, it is a incredible object lesson in how revitalizing a school turns a neighborhood around, for sure. Because I think there is this misconception among younger people in Chattanooga that somehow North Chattanooga was always this fancy pants, wealthy neighborhood, and that was not the case.
No, and do you remember when the walking bridge opened?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what year was that?
Man, I want to say Garnet Chapin. I should say shout out to Garnet Chapin, because a lot of people don't remember the fact that was largely due to, I'm going to use this time mentally to try to come up with the date, but it's worth talking about too. That was largely due to the efforts of one guy. Garnet Chapin, who when their bridge was, who you should interview at some point.
Okay.
Who realized when they condemned that bridge that it had this incredible historical and architectural value, and just stood in the gap and said, no, we can't let this happen, and took it upon himself to go raise the money to save it. And by God, he did save it. And then arguably it is the most iconic symbol of Chattanooga to this day. Right?
Can you imagine Chattanooga without that bridge?
No,
exactly. That's
exactly.
just the giant artery to connect North Shore to downtown.
In so many ways. I mean, it's
so
a functional. It's functional. It's symbolic.
It's beautiful. It's
beautiful.
the oldest bridge across the Chattanooga Tennessee River right there.
Absolutely. The height. Again, a lot of people don't.
The height.
You understand the significance of the height?
I'm assuming for the old barges and river cruise.
Well, it was
boats.
built before there was flood control. So that's how high the river used to get. If next time you're walking across that bridge, take a look around and think about the floodplain and look across at the Hunter Museum and realize, like, wow.
Well, someone was telling me you look at the aquarium and there's these staggered layers, and if you go down, I think 2 layers, which looks like about 5 feet or so from where the glass starts at the top. The big flood back in the day, that's the water level.
Yep, I think that's right.
That's crazy.
So I want to say, back to your original question, I want to say it was probably 1995, 6, 7, somewhere in there. It may have been a little bit later, but it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, and Scotty Bowman was helpful in. She had one of the first restaurants over there as well, the Big Chill.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they didn't have power. I mean, she had to get power in the abandoned building. So.
Yep. And then Sally Moses and the Moses family did the 212 Market restaurant, which unfortunately is not there. But I can remember when that was. That was the very first restaurant down there, and I remember people thinking they were nuts. They were just pioneers for being down there. And if you were around at the time, if you go back and look at the newspapers, it was hugely unpopular. People thought Jack Lupton was nuts. They called it, Jack's fish tank or Jack's folly. People were mad that the city and the county gave them the land, or all the city and the county did was give them the land around it for the plaza.
Really?
The aquarium itself was all private, all from Jack Lupton, and so how wrong were they? Obviously, massively, hugely wrong. So it's a great testament to not only from Garnet Chapin, but vision, man. It takes vision for somebody to step up and say, this is the right thing to do, even if it's unpopular, and we're going to do it.
That is so, man, there's a lot of generous people in Chattanooga. I'm thinking of McClellan Island.
Yeah.
That was donated.
Totally.
Someone used to own that. Can you imagine
McClellan
owning
family
that?
owned it, yeah.
Can you imagine the value of that island, and they just gave it away?
Yeah.
And then, shoot, I had another guy in the podcast that rides bikes. I forget his name. I'm sorry. You know him. You introduced him to me.
Okay.
Jim Johnson.
Okay, Jim. Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that he wrote a big, I think, $35,000 check for Stringer's Ridge.
Absolutely.
And can you imagine?
And not only that, not only his money, but his time, because he
time.
was largely the one who architected the trails, named the trails, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, and then his next plan and project is to make the river trail a 52-mile loop all the way around the city, connecting St. Elmo to the battlefield and then to Camp Jordan.
All the way down through North Georgia.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, is Chattanooga really is the hub of a region.
Yeah.
Right? And there are really 2 ways of looking at that. One way is that Chattanooga just needs to focus on Chattanooga and just disregard all the outlying areas, and never mind that. I don't, I'm more of a, they say there's a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset. I'm definitely more of an abundance mindset guy. And again, we are the hub of the region. So if it benefits the region, it benefits Chattanooga for sure. That would be, and of course, Jim runs a bike tour company.
Bike tour, yeah.
Mainly international.
Yep.
But of course, COVID has just crushed him, and he's doing his best. But I mean, he's buckling down and kind of refocusing on domestic stuff, as I understand it, and working on doing bike tour routes around here.
And he rides or has ridden all over the world.
Yeah.
And he'll tell you some of his favorite routes are here in Chattanooga.
I say that from being in the motorcycle business.
Yeah. Oh man.
There are mad maps and things where and there needs to be one around Chattanooga. Of course, you could use it for motorcycles or bicycles. But like you say, if you've ever ridden over in the Sequatchie Valley, up to Crossville and back down, and then of course east to the Tail of the Dragon and all that stuff, it's absolutely one of the most beautiful places to ride. anywhere in the world.
Do you know that I write for Roadrunner magazine?
No, man, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's one of my side jobs.
Wow.
So I do tours and everything, and I recently had an article that came out in Roadrunner magazine about Chattanooga.
Okay.
And Chattanooga, we called it like a staycation.
Yeah.
And we would just do day loops, and then come back. And like, this was pre-COVID, and like one night we came back to the ride, saw some friends playing at JJ's, some live music.
Yeah.
And then another night we just met up with some friends and had dinner at their house. And
Yeah.
you can just, Chattanooga, I don't know why it's not a motorcycle mecca town. Everyone's talking.
I've always said that.
Have you ever ridden Tail the Dragon?
Yeah,
It's
sure.
like a parade. You gotta. There's cops sitting on there. Not that you should be speeding, but you can't go
Oh, I know.
fast.
Yeah.
You're stuck behind a parade of Fiat 500s, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Oh, I know exactly
And,
what
like,
you mean. Yeah.
Man,
Oh, dude,
Chattanooga.
I did a trail race with my wife that Randy organized, Randy Horton,
Yeah.
that I'd love to see revised, called the Chattanooga Relay. And it was a team relay all the way to Knoxville. And that Knoxville team was running to Chattanooga. And we got the leg along the tail of the dragon. And I was pretty pissed at Randy about it for a while because I was running on the road.
You're running
the
on
motorcycle's going boom, 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 right past. I was like, I'm going to die. For sure I'm going to die.
Yeah.
But stuck it out. I didn't die.
That
So-
was the route you had.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of
and then a
roads to there,
big,
so-
big section of the Benton McKay Trail
Yeah.
that hadn't been bushwhacked in. I mean, we got lost. It was supposed to be a 17-mile leg. I can't remember how long. We ran into a black bear along the way. I thought my wife was going to have a heart attack. I mean, I almost had a heart attack. It was quite an adventure, but we survived. Randy's trail races are kind of notorious for being intentionally or unintentionally challenging, and so that was. But that needs to happen.
Randy
again.
and I were talking about kind of since I love topography so much and exploring, I kind of told Randy about the idea for a swim run race. that we have around in Chattanooga, and we're working on that. That's in the burner.
We've talked about that. You could do a paddleboard. I mean, there's so many cool things
we
you
have
could
so
do.
many options here.
And there's like a handful of places in the world you could do them.
Oh yeah.
You could do a paddleboard, mountain bike, trail run
Mm-hmm.
thing. You could do a swim run thing. There's a bunch of stuff. So that's, Randy helped out with this outdoor vision that we did. Again, this is not a campaign thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, Chattanooga really needs to focus, I think, more intentionally on its outdoor assets and its identity as an outdoor mecca. There's a lot of cool stuff we could be doing.
If you have just the way our topography is, with the mountains so close to the river and such a large river in our trail system, if you're creative, you can do whatever you want. I don't know any other city like this. There's cities at the foothills of mountains, but I start everything from my garage. I just call it garage projects. And I did one about 2 weeks ago. I've been getting into towing my kayak with my bike.
Okay.
And I towed my kayak.
Wait, hold up.
Yeah, that's.
What? How? Do you put wheels? Little
I have a
wheels on it?
Hobie,
Okay.
and the Hobie has just the wheels that pop in the scutters or whatever they're called. And it's a ghetto setup, and currently I have a rear rack on my bike, and I have hedge trimmers, and they wedge in the rack just perfectly.
What?
And I put a bunch of heating duct tape around it, that real sticky stuff for ducks.
Yeah, I know.
And then the little handle slides over the end of the shears. It's kind of ghetto, but I'm working on getting a better setup. But
That's so cool.
I tow that bike around, and I towed that to Lightfoot Mill Road,
Right.
and then I strapped the bike to the kayak, and I went from South Chick to the Tennessee River to downtown, the duck boat launch, and then I reverse the process and ride home. It's like
amazing.
a 20-mile loop, and it's a fun little day trip.
Ah, man, that is
Where else can you
super
do?
cool.
Where else
Right.
can you do that?
Exactly right. Yeah.
And I was on the river trail half the time, and side roads, and cars weren't an issue. So
There are a ton of opportunities around that. Outdoor Chattanooga, when it was first imagined and chartered, was meant to be a hub, like a resource center.
Yeah.
Where, if somebody wanted to start a business to guide people coming up here to do something like that. I mean, I think that's the sort of thing it should be doing. Because like you say, I can't think of any place where you could do that.
no, if you want to play in Chattanooga,
You need to file some patents on that deal, man. That's crazy.
There's two of us in town. My friend Tyler, he does the same thing,
Yeah.
but he has a custom trailer made, so he just puts on the trailer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, so here's a thought-provoking one that I say a lot. like Chattanooga is full of really talented people that could be anywhere, like you. But it's also got a lot of folks who have never left.
Yeah.
Who've born here, never left. I tell the story a lot. Like I only spent 4 years away from Chattanooga in New York City in college, and came back. And I remember the first year I came back home, I was flying back into town. I used to drive back and forth mainly, but for whatever reason, I was flying back this time, and the plane was landing, and I looked down at Chattanooga from the air, and I started crying because I was just like, I had been in Manhattan for a year, and I never thought about what an incredible city it is, just geographically.
Yeah.
So, and maybe this is too much of a softball, but coming at it from where you come from, what would you tell local residents like they should not take for granted about Chattanooga?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't. It's just so obvious that for me, the outdoor opportunities. But if you're not in outdoor opportunities, I don't know what to say. I mean, we have other opportunities. I'm not into the music scene, but I think we had a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Bluegrass had a real tight scene, but
Yep.
they unfortunately haven't been able to do some picking in about a year together.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's been tough.
But it is fairly affordable housing, fairly good infrastructure. We have good internet. I mean, even if you're not an outdoors person, I think there's lots of opportunity here.
Yep.
But I want to talk about when I moved from Lansing, Michigan to Chattanooga, the world became 3D. In Lansing, Michigan is flat for the most part.
Right.
So the roads are in a grid pattern. There's no elevation change.
Right.
There's not a lot of rivers, and the few rivers that there are, the roads just go straight across them. They don't follow them.
Right.
Chattanooga my mind has exploded with exploring the terrain because I went from a 2D plane to a 3D world.
Yeah. I
And
gotcha.
and
It's an interesting way of looking at it.
oh,
yeah.
it's so beautiful to just explore the city in 3D because I've always explored, but I was limited to 2 planes.
Yeah.
And now I have the 3rd axis.
Yeah,
And,
that's really fascinating.
And I even have,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the 4th axis with caves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
There's some cool caves around here, a lot of which are not talked about or not explored.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like climbing too. People
I
are like,
know, I don't talk.
But
yeah.
I mean, there are a lot that I know of a couple that I don't know that anybody's been back to for many, many years.
Have you been in any caves?
Oh God, yeah,
Okay.
a bunch, yeah.
Yeah.
There's some. I'll tell you, one of the Cave Conservancy.
Yeah.
We've sponsored a lot of stuff over the years from businesses, and one of the coolest events for a fundraiser I've ever been to, if you get a chance, is the Cave Conservancy locally did an event before COVID at Frick's Cave.
Yep.
Down in North Georgia, which is full of bats, and it was called Beers, Bats, and Bluegrass.
Yeah, that's
And man, they put a stage up in front of Frick's Cave, really great bluegrass ensemble, and then as the sun went down, they put lights on the cave, and everybody just kind of watched the bats come out of there. And where else can you do stuff like
I
that?
know.
It's amazing. And the cave is just,
And if
Cave Conservancy is one of the cooler and more overlooked nonprofits
they're
here.
super cool.
Yeah, Amber Lehman, who actually used to work for me, and her husband are very involved there. And again, part of what makes Chattanooga so amazing is the incredible nonprofit.
And if what you just described
Yeah.
isn't enough to get you excited, you can do it on a stand-up paddleboard at Nick and Jack Cave.
Yeah.
Let's add one more element. Let's just do it from a stand-up paddleboard.
Yeah.
That Chattanooga keeps outdoing itself with all these things.
That we're always there.
They're always there.
That's what blows my mind. When I was a kid growing up here, I'm 53, we talked about the aquarium earlier. I mean, you went over the river. I'm old enough to remember going over the Walnut Street Bridge in the car with my mom, and it was scary, man, because it was super narrow, and the cars were bigger back then. But that was it. Like, there was no truck with the Congress with the river. Like, nobody did anything on the river. I mean, I grew up on, canoeing with my dad and kayaking, but not on the Tennessee River.
Did you swim in the river as a kid?
You know,
Was that kind
occasionally it was just kind of a stupid human trick. Like there was
Yeah.
a kid that was a really good swimmer I knew that was like, we would see if maybe could you swim across the river.
Yeah.
But even then people were like, ew, you know, I don't know if I'd done that. You know, it was definitely not something people did on a regular basis or recreationally.
Are you? Can we clear the air? Is the Tennessee River bad to swim in?
Not now.
Not now.
I think. Well, I should say
Well,
this.
when the water
asterisk.
we have a few times.
So I've learned a lot of things through the process in the last year, you know, running for office. And one of the things is that our sewer system is a combined stormwater sewer system, meaning, you know, really simply, you know, so everybody understands sewage, but when we have a heavy rain or any rain at all, it flows into the same system. And if we had it to do over again, we would never design the system that way because, another little tidbit about Chattanooga that you may or may not know, we actually get more annual rainfall than Seattle.
Oh, I know that.
But it comes in these torrential downpours in the summertime rather than these kind of like daily misting rains, right?
And I have to add one comment to that. We also get 60 more days of sunshine than Seattle.
Wow.
We get more rain and 2 months more sunshine. I just keep going.
True, yeah. It's a good bar bet. You know, a lot of people would never, those things don't seem to jibe, but it's because we get those super heavy rains. If you've ever seen somebody move here from like the particularly the desert Southwest, but even I'll never forget being with a new resident during one of these typical Chattanooga summer thunderstorms, and I thought the poor woman was going to have an absolute conniption fit meltdown. She thought it was like the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's a June thunderstorm because they're pretty violent.
When
right?
they come.
They come and it's hot and heavy, man. And so, but anyway, back to stormwater.
Yeah.
Because of that, of course, you get these giant spikes in flow, and those spikes in flow cause overflow into the Tennessee River. And if the stormwater and the sewers combined,
I know,
right? So a lot of people complain about the EPA consent decree. So what happened, of course, is the federal government, which has the responsibility through the Environmental Protection Agency of protecting fresh water everywhere, because it is a common good, right? The water here goes elsewhere. You might have remembered the big Supreme Court battle between on the Flint River watershed that runs down through at Georgia into Florida, and there was a big fight between Georgia, which is trying to hoard water for growth.
Yes.
And the people downstream of them.
Yes.
Right. So we won't go down that route. But the bottom line is it is a federal issue because it's an interstate issue. So, you know, love it or hate it, right? The EPA is there to protect water for everybody.
Yeah.
And so they came in basically because generations of local government didn't fix the sewer system and said, okay, you have to fix it or you're going to face these massive fines. And so a lot of the stormwater fees that we're paying are there to fund the repair of a lot of this stuff. And it's got to get fixed. The question is, what's the most cost-efficient way to fix it? And particularly in that, what they call the recreational segment of the Tennessee River, they're using some interesting techniques there to they use bleach in a lot of the water that comes in to disinfect it. There are techniques to use UV light, which could help.
I could see that.
But we could be. They just built, like a lot of folks don't know this. They just built 3 massive reinforced concrete retention tanks
on Mox and Bend. I was wondering what those were.
That's what that is. Because if you think about those giant water flows, the whole idea is let's let it flow into these retention tanks, hold it, treat it, and then let it go back into the river, treated, healthy. So that's what that's about. And kudos to the current administration and whoever had anything to do with it, because that's going to be a huge help when they get that online.
What's the long-term solution? Because right now you say the septic and the stormwater are mixed. Is there a long-term, in 100 years, in 200 years, what are we going to do with our septic, or what should be done?
Well, Greenville, South Carolina, significantly is digging a tunnel under the city that is like 11 feet tall and a few miles long to act as basically a giant retention tank.
Oh, like a septic tank,
right?
Glorified.
Well, so both conduit and retention. So imagine all this stuff just flows in there and then trickles out once it's had the opportunity to be treated in a slow way.
Where's it get dumped? Does it
I don't know the
Does
river.
it go in
that
the
runs-
dirt, kind of like a leach field?
No, no,
What-
no.
Okay.
It's going back out into the I don't know
They
the
pump
river
back
that
up.
runs through or near Greenville,
know
but
that one.
that's where it's going. So I think retention is the issue.
Yeah.
And
Because we have the spike in rains. That's
that's
our
it.
problem.
That's our problem. And if we had it to do over, we would do two separate systems:
Yeah.
a stormwater system and a septic sewer system. You could treat them differently because they are different.
Right.
Although in some ways, right, you see all these things in grates in Chattanooga that have a fish on them. Thank God they did this years ago, because people don't know a lot of times. Like, oh, here's some used motor oil.
I know.
It's going straight to the river, man. And so,
dump it in the- yeah.
and things have gotten better, right? When I was a kid, you did not see blue herons in Chattanooga. None. There were no bald eagles. There was no look, wildlife. There were no smallmouth bass in the Tennessee River when I was a kid. There are now. The water and smallmouth are notoriously fickle as to water quality. So the water is getting better.
That's an indicator of healthy
No doubt.
ecosystem.
Could it be better? It could be better. It could definitely be better, but we are definitely making progress. There's
Yeah.
no question about
I
it.
saw 4 blue herrings yesterday.
Yeah, there's a big rookery on the end of McClellan Island, or was,
Yep.
and amazing birds. Really, we're lucky that those are here. But yeah, those weren't here when I was a kid.
Yeah.
None. And again, there were no sturgeon in the river when I was a kid. None of that. So wildlife has made a big comeback.
What do you know about Chattanooga Creek as far as pollution?
Man, so Steve O'Neill was on this podcast some months ago.
Feels
like
like,
years. Not last year, seemed like 10 years. But Steve knows a ton about it because he's got a company that does environmental, or did have a company that did environmental remediation. A lot of that stuff, very badly polluted. But the pollution, interestingly, is in the mud, sunk down, mainly undisturbed now.
Yeah.
At the bottom of these creeks, it's in tar sands and stuff. They need to be cleaned up, and we need to get on the EPA's list to get them cleaned up. But the thing about it is, because they're embedded in that stuff, they don't badly contaminate, as I understand it, the most of the flowing water currently, as long as there's no current pollution going in. The irony of it is, most of the remediation methods to clean them up are very kind of mechanical and brutal, which is
Yeah,
to say,
an
let's get a
excavator.
and just dig this stuff out, which just redisturbs it and puts all those heavy metals, the cadmium and the mercury and stuff, back into the water. Steve's thing is, and again, I don't know anything about environmental science, so this is just what I'm told, but that there are actually methods using bacteria, that can break a lot of that stuff down over time, and but the EPA's chosen this sort of old school method.
Just physically take it out with machinery.
But right now, I don't even know that it's on a list
Yeah.
to clean up. But it needs to be cleaned up because if you've ever floated through there, and I have,
I have not,
Oh,
but
I
it's
have.
on my list.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
If you go down Workman Road, like down there
Yep.
where Southern Honda is,
Yeah.
and
Is
there's
that what you put in?
You can. I mean, I actually, because that stuff was polluted, it was super cheap, and I had a realtor approach me a few years back, and it's just like, here's 5 acres for 10 grand or some kind of thing like that. And so because I already had the store there, I thought, well, why not, right? So, but I had the opportunity to walk that property, and I mean, there's turkeys on it. I mean, we're talking about Alton Park,
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
between Russell Boulevard and Alton Park Boulevard. There's a ton of wild turkeys back there. They're incredible old growth trees. The creek is absolutely beautiful, and we need to get that stuff cleaned up and return it to people being able to use it.
Is
But
it
the question is how.
Is it mostly flood zone back there?
Oh,
You
yeah.
can't really build.
So, which is perfect, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it could be recreational. It
That'd
should
be
be
nice if
recreational.
it's parks. I would like that.
Yeah, me too. But if you've ever, Chickamauga and Chattanooga Creek both, and I've done this on a paddleboard, you can come in from the Tennessee River and just paddle up them.
Yeah.
You might as well be in, it reminded me of those scenes from Apocalypse Now, actually, where they're kind of going up. I mean, they're so verdant and green, and largely there's no development along them. I mean, they're just incredibly beautiful, and nobody's there.
Yeah.
They're amazing. But no, I don't think there's any, knock on wood, current polluters there, and most of that pollution is I don't even think we really have any do not eat the fish warnings in local creeks right around there anymore. But
If
bottom feeding fish, typically
Yeah.
catfish and things, are much more inclined to accumulate heavy metals and so on. So
I think there may be a sign on Market Street as it crosses Chattanooga Creek that says you can eat one fish.
right.
I think there might be that
I
sign
think if
there.
I see that sign, I'm probably just going to skip the
Yeah,
fishing
I'm not eating.
altogether.
No, I have a salmon, so I don't eat
But
fish on here.
I think Chattanooga's stock and trade really is in business we like to talk about sustainable competitive advantage. You
Right.
ever, go to graduate school, that's the corporate strategy thing. Like, what do you have, your company or your city or your organization that nobody else can copy and that you can really leverage? And it is our natural environment here. Like, nobody can take that from us. So we have to protect it and preserve it, and it really should be the cornerstone of what Chattanooga's about, to me.
That being said, what do you think about the project, the Black Bear subdivision, expanding to on top of Etna Mountain, which is the wild west of Chattanooga?
I don't know much about it, honestly. It's right at the fringe of Chattanooga out there.
Yeah,
that's
it's
when you're
still
talking-
in
yeah.
Hamilton County, but it
Okay.
bumps right up against Marion. From what I've heard, they have all these rules such as you can't clear the front of your brow line, houses have to be set back,
Yeah.
and I think recently they struck a deal with Sorba to donate 14 miles of mountain bike trails. Somewhere my
Interesting.
numbers may be
That's
off by a little, but
Yeah.
I just wonder if you had it. Since I like to explore, I like knowing about all these things. I was hoping you'd have some insight.
I don't. Unfortunately, I don't know much
Okay.
about that one.
Okay.
But I think the job of local leadership is to make sure people understand that, look, we have a lot of debate around steep slope, development here. And Jim Johnson's very involved with that, right? And on the one hand, steep slopes are part of Chattanooga's DNA. And we have to continue to develop responsibly. On the other hand, sustainability is part of Chattanooga's DNA. So, the devil's in the details. There are no simple answers, and so we got to figure out how to do that stuff in a responsible, sustainable way, and it can be done
I think
that
so.
way, right?
I do believe in win-win situations. I think that's possible.
Yeah, I do too. Well, all right. Let's see here. Moving down the list of sort of basic stuff. This is a pretty good one. What do you think Chattanooga can do better as a city since you've been here?
Ooh, what could Chattanooga do better? Okay, I'll take some. I'll bite. And this may be controversial,
That's
but
okay, man.
I
We're already in the weeds.
I think we could use some more variety in cuisine. And I only say that because I didn't realize I did come from Lansing, Michigan, and I was spoiled because we had a giant university, Michigan State University, and all those kids need to eat, and it's a very diverse population. We have people from all over the world going there, so all these little micro restaurants popped up, and college kids are poor, so it's cheap.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have the best Korean barbecue. We have an Ethiopian restaurant. The cheap sushi that's good.
Yeah.
And Chattanooga is we make really good burgers.
Yeah.
And American food, but I just like a little extra.
It's a great point.
You
And
know?
it goes to a number of things, right? Like other observations, like there are no great cities without great universities. To me, I don't think Chattanooga gets where it needs to be, which I think, again, it has the potential to be the best city in America, all things considered, without UTC really sort of raising its game, which is going to involve probably getting more resources from the University of Tennessee system, which probably no fault of theirs. I think Dr. Angle and the leadership over there is doing everything they can to, but the university, if UTC gets more resources, and of course Chattanooga State as well, but mainly UTC, that solves a lot of problems for the city, including that one.
That would solve that.
Yeah.
Does UTC have a size constraint problem with the?
No, they've grown a lot. When I'm telling my age, but UTC when I was growing up was really a bedroom university. You didn't have a lot of people coming here to, from out of city, let alone out of state.
Yeah.
I went back there and taught as a adjunct a few years back. And I remember being quite surprised to learn that all of a sudden, again, largely because of Chattanooga's quality of life, there were kids in class from Atlanta and from Memphis and from Nashville. And that was never the case, man, or very rarely the case, I should say.
Yeah.
I had a lot of friends that went to UTC when I went off to college. and that just wasn't that way. So and so there've been a lot of dorms built. They built a lot more student housing to bring people in. So I think they've got still a lot of upside. But another little piece of history from Chattanooga. Chattanooga, before I think it was 1965, it was UC. It was a private Methodist university, University of Chattanooga, independent. And they joined the UT system after that. In theory, again, like a lot of things, makes great sense on paper, economy of scale and shared vision and mission and so on. But as I understand it, we were promised a lot of things that never came to pass, including doctoral programs and things that would have helped, like bring diversity here and brought economic opportunity here. I'm a huge fan of this book, The New Localism. I've handed out a ton of copies of that book. I'll give you one if you want it. I recommend it to anybody. If I will literally buy anybody that wants one a free copy of that book. So for the record.
That's funny. I have the same. I give away Rich Dad Poor Dad.
That's a great one too.
That's a book that I really like. Yeah. So I have about 5 copies in my house that I just give away for that same.
The Daily Stoic is a favorite of mine too. I mean, that one. Anybody wants a copy of the Daily Stoic or the New Localism that can't afford it, call me. I'll buy you a copy. I mean, they're game changers.
Do you listen to podcasts much?
I try, but I just don't have much time.
Yeah, I understand.
I mean, long trips is when I try to catch up.
I'm just curious what your kind of favorite ones are, if you had.
I like Hidden Brain.
Hidden Brain, yeah.
I listen to The Economist, The Intelligence every morning when I get up. I love that one. It's just long enough. I can get out of the shower and brush my teeth and usually kind of wrap it up. They usually have some. There was a really interesting segment this morning on wait for it, the African comic book industry.
Oh,
I mean, who knew?
Yeah.
But it's just, The Economist is such a fantastic magazine, and it's just such great content. So I'm a big fan of that.
While you were talking, I thought of another thing that I would like to see improved in Chattanooga.
Yeah, perfect.
And that is the theft. There's quite a lot of theft. You can't leave a drill in the back of your truck and go inside and get a glass of water and come back outside. And it doesn't matter where you're at.
And it's that spirit of the feeling of violation. I mean, it's stuff.
Yes.
But I agree, man. And I've got some good friends. I've made more since I began the process of campaigning at the Chattanooga Police Department, and it's a resource issue, right? Petty, I think from sometimes they get in the habit of thinking, it's just a drill, right?
Yeah.
But petty theft is one of those things where people feel violated, and it's a little bit like the old broken windows theory, but it is a resource thing. They just do not have enough people to stay after it. So I'm looking forward to diving into that and seeing what more we can do about it, because it's.
Do you think that's a cultural element as well, where it's?
You mean on the perpetrator standpoint, or
yes, yes,
well,
where it's.
I say, look, I think the answer to all social problems eventually leads back to education, and because education leads to opportunity. And sitting in that very chair a few weeks ago or months ago was Dr. Brian Johnson, who was, of course, who is the superintendent for the Hamilton County Schools here. And it's funny, I asked him, what's the purpose of education? And he said, I thought he would talk about the development of critical thinking or something. And he said, but he said, options. It's about options, right? And it's a great point, right? Because if you've got an education, you've got suddenly a whole range of options, which you may or may not take. But it's a dispositive problem. If you don't have that education, you have no options. And so I think, I was just reading today, it was just before I walked in here, the disparity in Chattanooga between rich and poor and between black and white is like 30% worse than the national average, and the national average is really bad. So look, it's not by in itself a racial thing at all, but we have to be able to create opportunity for folks. So because people are gonna find a way to It's wrong. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's the rule of law 101, and there have to be consequences, and there has to be enforcement.
I'll be the first to. People are survivors.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first to say I've stolen food before when I was in college and poor.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It's the Les Miserables thing. You know.
People have to do what they have to do. So I think you're absolutely right. Some education is really important. I think people need to realize. I think I would like education to teach creative thinking.
Yeah.
Because with a creative mind, you can improve your life.
Yeah. Right.
That's what I think.
That's right.
And in my opinion, schools kind of teach like you can do this, this, and this. But if you start thinking a little too wild, well, you need to come back down from that ledge.
Right.
Let's think traditionally.
Right.
And I support wild ideas and crazy thinking and
Totally
dreams.
agree. That's why I'm a big fan of STEM or STEAM.
Yeah.
Because I was a mentor for.
I think mentors are great too, by the way.
Well, yeah, hugely important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the Big Brothers Big Sisters board. It's one of the first pieces of board service that I did in Chattanooga. But recently, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk specifically about it, but I was a mentor for a vice principal at a STEM school.
Okay.
And so I got to spend a lot of time in the STEM school at Chattanooga State, and it was fascinating because it's exactly what you're saying. That education method isn't really specifically about, science, technology, engineering, math. It's really more about case-based in education, which is about engagement, right? It's about applied education, which I think is particularly important for boys. We have a real issue with boys being disengaged, which obviously are also heavily disproportionately the problem with petty theft.
Yes.
It's mainly boys who are just bored with school, very frankly, right? And they need context to understand why. So I'm also a huge fan. There's a building trades academy that's this close to being done going into COVID. And, there's such an incredible opportunity in skilled trades, in carpentry and I mean, all the professions attached to that pay really good money.
Yeah.
That we're missing, and they can't find people, and there are kids on the street that if they just connected a few basic dots to get there, when you're making $20 an hour and you got a little change in your pocket and you've got a car and now you got a girlfriend, suddenly that's how you solve ultimately public safety problems is economic development, I think. And so it's a long game, but in the meantime, we just have to give the police department the resources to enforce the law.
That's kind of more of a Band-Aid versus the fundamental.
It is. Yeah.
First principles.
That's exactly right. And I say a lot. I think we need, I think I'm one, but I think we need politicians who are going to take a more long-term approach to problems, not just.
I'm into long-term solutions.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, that's why I asked about the septic and the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't have any further political ambitions at all, right? My whole thing is just what can I do to fix Chattanooga for the long term and go back to enjoying my life in Chattanooga.
Yeah.
But this is not a political podcast. So, well, how long have we been doing this now? A little while. I guess, I got to get on another thing. So, yes, let me wrap this up with this one.
Sure.
Chattanooga has a great opportunity to attract a lot of really talented people post-COVID, right? A lot of people are coming here.
Oh.
So, and we'll try to keep this relatively brief. I think we've done a pretty good job of selling Chattanooga unintentionally. But do you see any downsides to that trend potentially, or challenges that we'll have to? The
challenges to a larger influx of people coming.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, okay, so my girlfriend works in real estate, and if you're a local in Chattanooga who is trying to buy a home for the first time, it's extremely competitive, and you are getting trampled over, kind of. The games of buying a house have changed. Yeah. You can't be picky. You have to go in with some cash a lot of times, and that's a downside because people from California who have a lot of assets, the Chattanooga looks real cheap. It's what Americans used to do to go to Mexico.
Right.
Oh, I can go to Mexico, and this hotel is only $40, and they get it, and then they're tipping everybody a lot of money, and it's like these tacos are $2.50. Oh, here's $10. I don't care.
Yeah.
And you actually, with that attitude, you actually change the culture in Mexico and make it really hard for the locals who live there, and make it different for when tourists come. Now that the Mexicans expect $10 for the $2.50, and I don't want the same thing to happen to Chattanooga, because we have reasonable prices now, and I'm nervous with people from California, New York, Washington coming here and just like, oh, this house is only $250,000. Yeah, I'll buy it that day. And then the person whose dream in Chattanooga was to get this house, they're going to stretch their money. We can probably they're out of luck.
So we wound up talking a lot about this last year. Affordable housing is going to be a much, much bigger issue here going forward, because it's one thing, again, if you think about somebody who hasn't, for whatever reason, had the opportunities or the educational resources, who's just not going to be able to make more than, $10-12 an hour. Think about what that does to that person, right? I mean, so we really, you hear a little bit about gentrification now, but we could really have a problem on our hands if we're not careful. So I think we got to take a much more intentional approach to affordable housing, to preserving some of that and getting involved. So we'll see. I mean, it might slack off, as COVID sort of dies down, but it'll be a really interesting thing to watch.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, man, this just went like that.
I know. It's fun.
We could spend the rest of the day here, but I've literally got another Zoom call that I got to jump on, so we'll wrap it up. Anything you want to plug other than the amazing podcast? People of Chattanooga, everybody should go check it out. There's not a bad one that I've heard. They're amazing.
That's all I would like to plug is, if you are interested, tell your friends about that. It's a really fun project I'm doing, and I hope I'm doing it for the right reasons. I love Chattanooga.
You definitely are. So, you need not question yourself.
And also, I just encourage people to get outside. Yeah. If you live in the city and you haven't been to Snoopers Rock, I'm calling you out. Go there. Yeah. Because there's actually people that haven't.
I know. So, there's a lot of people. Yeah. We had Moise Baptiste, who was on not long ago, who's making it his mission to get people of color in particular out there, and he's doing a great job, and his Wakanda Trail Runners is doing a fantastic service to the city. So absolutely, that is a great way to wrap it up. So thank you so much for joining us today, Luke. And thanks to our audience for tuning in. Feel free to chime in with any feedback, anything you want to talk about, hear about, let us know. I'd also like to thank Summer Dregs, a local artist, for providing our music. And thanks to OCI for contributing our sturdy furniture. You've been watching Common Purpose. I'm Tim Kelly. Stay healthy and stay hopeful, Chattanooga.
You my little baby homie, and I love it that you know me so much better than